All right, so we've talked about the Articles of Confederation, the first constitution of this country, the social compact or the agreement between the government and its people. And it was purposely set up to have a very limited and weak federal government. Well, what they didn't foresee were some of the problems that arose from these weaknesses. So you can consider two major areas of problems under the Articles of Confederation. One are the economic problems or economic questions that were raised because of these weaknesses under the Articles of Confederation. The biggest one was, how is the nation going to make money? If we can't tax the citizens, if we can't tax the American people, how are we going to be able to fund our government? How are we going to be able to fund and raise a military? So they could go and ask for donations. They could ask each state to lend them money. But as I'm sure many of you have experienced firsthand, when you go and try and collect money from people and they don't have to pay it, typically they're not going to. You're going to hear a lot of no's, no thank yous, I can't do it at this time, as opposed to people who are willing to donate without expecting anything in return. Okay, so no power to tax, no power to regulate trade. That created some big economic questions. Another question was, where's our money good and what was its worth? So at the time, there was no federal currency. Each state had their own dollars, their own coins. And so it would be like you creating your own currency with your picture on it, your face on it, or using Monopoly money and going to Target or going to the lunchroom and trying to buy a lunch using Monopoly money. They would look at you and say, this is no good here, okay? Because they use a specific federal type of currency and it's accepted everywhere you go. So if you were to go on a trip to Virginia, or if you went to Colorado and went skiing, the money that you bring that you can use here in Michigan is the same money that they would accept in Colorado and in Virginia. At the time under the Articles of Confederation, each state had their own currency. So if you didn't have a Pennsylvania dollar or a Pennsylvania coin, then they were not going to accept that you couldn't buy anything. Another economic question was, how would we repay our debts that we incurred during the war? So war costs money, and the Revolutionary War for Independence lasted about 7.5 years. So that's a lot of time, a lot of resources that were needing to be used, and spending money on those resources. You got to pay it back somehow. So the United States had to borrow money and supplies and resources from countries like Spain and France more than anybody else. And those countries were expecting some sort of payback, okay? If not financially, then, okay, you owe us. So if you can't pay back your debt, you owe us. And if you can't help us when we need you, then we might attack you, or you're going to get this reputation as a country that borrows but doesn't pay back. And nobody wants to be known as the borrower but not the person that pays back. So there was this big weight of debt on the back of the American government. Now, there were also some political questions, and political is one of the vocab words that we looked at on Monday. And political basically means your stance on an issue. Where are you going to decide? Are you going to go this way or that way? Political can also mean, how are decisions going to be made? And how is our government going to be run? So the big political question under the Articles of Confederation was, there was no court system. So how would we settle disputes? How would we determine who's right and who's wrong? Who's going to determine what this law means? How are we going to interpret these laws? If two states or two large groups or organizations are butting heads with one another, who's going to step in and determine who's right and who's wrong? Which direction is this going to go? So with no judicial system, no court system, that's a big problem. Another political question was, did state legislatures have the best interest of the people in mind? So with Shays' Rebellion, there was that group of angry farmers led by Daniel Shays in Massachusetts who said, you're taxing us to try and make money back from the Revolutionary War, but I fought in the Revolutionary War. I wasn't able to tend to my farm and my crops because I was fighting in the war to help you gain independence to be able to self-govern and make laws that I have to follow. So because I was fighting in a war, I couldn't make money on my farm. I was actually losing money. And now you're going to come after me. Instead of saying thanks for your service, you're basically taxing me and penalizing me because I'm not able to pay you back. And so the question raised was, do these state legislatures, do these state governments, do they really have the best interest of the people in mind? Or are they greedy and are they just looking to make money, just like the British government was? And so with these rebellions, that made the collective community of Americans say, whoa, whoa, whoa. If we're having all these problems under the Articles of Confederation, should we maybe revise them? Should we create a different social compact? Should we create a different constitution that governs this place?